Thanks, everyone. So yeah, thank you for the introduction. I really appreciate that. And thank you all for coming here tonight. Yeah, stormy day, and I appreciate anyone who's willing to venture out in this weather to make it to one of these things. Yeah, I came to one myself for the first time last month, and it was really interesting. And so when the folks here reached out to me to do a FireSmart presentation, I was excited. And our team thought that that was a good way to reach a good audience in the regional district. So my name is Carla, and I am a local FireSmart representative for the regional district. Today's presentation is going to start with a rough description of wildfire ecology and a couple of key species that I'd like to use as an example to how some of the interactions work out there in this region. And then the second half of that will be to give you the knowledge that you need directly from the FireSmart program to protect your home and your community from damages from wildfire. So before I begin, I'd like to respectfully acknowledge that I work and reside on the unceded ancestral lands of the Ktunaxa and Shuswap First Nations, and I extend my sincere gratitude for the opportunity to live, learn, and grow on this land, and I remain committed to fostering mutual respect, understanding with the rich histories of the cultures of the Ktunaxa and Shuswap. And yeah, recently I am also really excited to learn from the wisdom of the First Nations here. And there are so many parts of what I do that is, you know, we're reinventing the wheel in some places. There is wisdom here that they were using to protect themselves in a lot of the same ways that I'm going to talk about today. So the reason we're going to talk about the wildfire environment is because in order to understand how to protect ourselves, we need to understand why it is that it burns in the first place. So this is how BC's forestry industry has described the forests here. The map represents BC, and you can see there's a little bit of this orange-pink color in here in this southeast region where we live. The Rocky Mountain Trench is unique and fosters a few different types of zones. The zones are biogeoclimatic zones, and so they take into account the tree species, the climate in the region, the geography, everything about the soil that causes things to grow and live the way that they do. So up here on your right is a map that kind of divides things up into a little bit simpler regions that you may have heard of before. And so I just wanted to acknowledge that that exists in case it's confusing. But we're not talking about the southern interior mountains today. We're talking about specifically the zones, and those being two main zones that we're going to look at, even though there are more here where we live, especially as you climb up into higher altitudes. Then, as you're probably aware, all of the tree species and the temperature, everything is a little bit different up there. So this sort of orange color over here is the ponderosa pine, ponderosa pine zone. It covers only 0.4% of the province, and it's mostly here in the Rocky Mountain Trench. It's the driest of all the forest zones, and it occurs below the moister and cooler zone that is the interior Douglas fir. I'm going to talk about that one in a second. So it's defined by a ponderosa pine overstory, open forest with a lot of grass, in particular, blue bunch wheatgrass. And then the understory is normally Douglas fir. And so in this ponderosa pine forest type, you see open spaces with big, tall ponderosa pine trees and little clusters of Douglas fir that tend to be younger, living more in an understory, and then a lot of grass. So next we're going to look at the interior Douglas fir. And this one is the second warmest of all of the forest types. Dry southern interior, and Douglas fir is the main tree species here. So maybe when we're a little bit closer to Kimberley, you'll see more Douglas fir. It's a thicker forest. And then interspersed in there is a lot more lodgepole pine. And you don't see as much ponderosa. So this is the species composition that I'm talking about. So ponderosa pine, mostly ponderosa pine here in the green, with a lot of Douglas fir in the understory in the purple. And then over here in our interior Douglas fir, mostly Douglas fir, and then a mix with some ponderosa, but a lot of lodgepole pine, which is a very fire-prone species, and all of these other kind of diverse species mixed in there. So I'm going to talk about these three species of plants in particular, because in those forest zones that I just showed everyone, these are the dominant species. So I'm going to look at how they relate to wildfire, and just keep in mind that pretty well every creature, organism that exists out here in the Rocky Mountain Trench is adapted to wildfire in some way. So the types of things that you learn about these species may be different for other plants or animals or fungus, but they all have some type of adaptation in response to wildfire. So ponderosa pine is extremely drought resistant. It is not resistant to heavy snowpack. So thinking about where we see this in the Rocky Mountain Trench, typically down lower where there's less snow, and also it can get very hot and dry. So shade intolerant. This isn't a species that grows up in the understory. It needs wide open spaces to thrive. It's fast growing. Semi-serotinous cones, which serotiny means it uses fire to help open up and then eventually germinate the cone. And so this species does require some heat to activate its seeds. It has fire-resistant bark, especially in the trees that are a lot older. And it self-prunes its limbs, which means that a surface fire, unless it has very long flame length, is going to pass right by this tree. They live up to 600 years, and during that time, they see a lot of wildfires, and any of the big ponderosa pines that are around here now have probably seen a few of them and survived. So this is how it has adapted to a fire environment. It requires the heat for its seeds. It's very drought resistant, so it can handle these temperatures, and when it starts to get very hot and dry, this tree doesn't suffer. And it also protects itself from low intensity fire. This is the fir. So it has a moderate drought resilience. I've actually had a lot of questions on my different visits around the RDEK regarding why are the fir dying here? And it's a question that a lot of the foresters have been getting, period. And this, well, there's a lot of reasons, but one of the reasons is this moderate drought resilience, because we have been experiencing a drought for the last few years. And so the fir is suffering. It is shade tolerant, and that's why you see it growing close together in thick clumps and growing up underneath the pine. It's fast growing, and while it doesn't require the same heat with its cones, it does benefit from the wildfire coming through, and it has high germination on sites that have just burned. So wildfire helps prepare a site for a seed to grow by removing all of the competition. There's no longer a lot of weeds and grass and things that might overshadow it from the sun. It opens up space on the ground. So if there was a dense litter layer on the ground, the wildfire would come through and remove that. So now the seed can actually reach the organic soil. It creates a warm spot because black absorbs heat from the sun. And so all of these reasons help the Douglas fir to also germinate after a fire has come through. So they also have fire-resistant bark when they're mature. And this is another tree that can get very big and very old, 1,500 years old for these ones. So they are susceptible to crown fires, and this is because they've got a lot more burnable foliage in comparison to the ponderosa pine. Their shade tolerance doesn't create the same amount of self-pruning in the bottom, and growing close together can help a fire to move through the crown. One more thing, they have timber value. So yes, that is part of the forest industry, and compared to the ponderosa pine, that is significant. So now this is the blue bunch wheatgrass that I was excited to talk about today. We see this kind of everywhere. I'm just gonna go to the next slide. This grass, is everybody kind of familiar with this species? So this grass can root 4.6 feet, which is 1.5 meters. It has really, really resilient roots. It occurs in dry, open woods, dry slopes and canyons, and it requires excellent drainage. It doesn't live in wet sites. It requires full sun. So this is a plant that needs those big open spaces. So it's noted in early succession on burned sites, and it's well established in open grasslands and woodlands. I was looking up a little bit more information about this grass, and it's really hard to germinate from a seed because it has a dormancy period that can live through a lot, and it'll only become ready to germinate and out of dormancy when it experiences very specific conditions. So what happens is mass flowering after a fire. And then other than that, it's really hard to obtain the seeds that are actually viable. It's also common in older established plant communities. And so because it doesn't spread prolifically through its seeds, it takes time to establish. But once it's established, those roots can really withstand wildfire. So this plant doesn't grow in places where the fire regime is 30 years or longer. yeah, there's the other picture of it. So we're kind of getting a little bit more into the fire terminology here, but I'd like to talk about the idea of a fire mosaic. And this is what happens when wildfire goes through an area that has a lot of diversity. So in this picture, there may have been some open grassy areas over there. This may have been a very mature stand of trees. And then what happens after a fire, and this is kind of familiar to what the top of a wildfire might look like a month after it's burned. You see pockets of diversity. So now this landscape is broken up, and a species will start at a different age in here, and a new species will start at a different age in here. And it creates a tree stand that has different ages and different characteristics. And so right here, what may have happened is that there was a Douglas fir stand, and it was getting quite old, and maybe there was drought there, and some beetles started to move in. So now with the beetles attacking the tree produces a lot of resin, and resin burns like gasoline. It's on purpose as a survival mechanism from the tree. So what the tree covered in resin has done, it has quarantined itself as well as some of its neighbors from any of those pathogens that might be trying to kill the greater survival of that tree. So if there's a fungus in there, if there's a beetle, if there's all of the different things that flock to a dying stand of trees, now the resin will quarantine that by creating a very intense fire that burns everything and hopefully cuts that pathogen out of the picture for a little while. So all of the organisms in this environment are going to react differently. And I've said that a couple of times, but it's important that there is a huge diversity of different plants, animals, mushrooms. Like if we think of the relationship that we have with the morel mushroom out here and how it requires fire in order to exist somehow. It just appears after a fire. There really are a lot of connections here. So a study that comes to mind for me as an example of this is when I was in forestry and they told us about the red squirrel eating the pine cones from the tree and then burying them, and also finding mushrooms and burying those in its little stash. And so when they closely studied this fungus and looked at where all of the seedlings were coming up for the tree, it was a relationship where the squirrel ate the mushrooms and the seeds, so it's benefiting from both. The fungus helped the tree to pick up more nutrients. This is why we buy compost with mycelium at the nursery, so that we can get the benefits of that. And then the squirrel is also helping to spread the spores and the seeds of these two things in order to help them spread through the forest. So it's all intertwined like this, and this is a fire environment. So everything has some sort of a little secret about how it deals with wildfire. So I'm going to talk a little bit about fire intensity. So this is just a photo that I found that looks like a fire environment in its healthy state. So we see some diversity. We see an open grassy area. We see a standalone tree that's been there for a while. We see some smaller things coming up in little clumps. And this is an example of what a healthy ponderosa forest might look like. Honestly, one of the most beautiful forests to me out here, when I lived down LD Ranch Road and I drove into Cranbrook for my commute every day, is where it has been burned again and again. And you'll see this type of landscape down on the reserve, in St. Mary's and up the road on LD Ranch Road there. And it's a really beautiful example of what the wildfire can do. So I'm going to come back to soil, because that's pretty important when we're talking about wildfires. And so this is a low intensity wildfire. This is a surface grass fire, and it is not doing a lot of damage to the soil. In this situation, the ground might even still be cold because it's early spring or fall. And so the grass on top, the litter, the dead and combustible fuels, those are all going to be consumed by this, but the soil remains intact. It actually just has a light covering of ash on top of it. And out here, that organic layer is very, very thin. And so this is important. This is what happens when there's a very intense fire. It obviously eats through the organic layer, the roots, all of the seeds, and everything is gone. So this is what we're trying to avoid out there for the landscape, because when we see damage like this, it causes issues for our watersheds, erosion, mudslides. If there's a big rainstorm right after a very intense fire, it's bound to cause mudslides for this reason. There's nothing left for it to hang on to. So all of that goes into our water systems, and there's sedimentation in the rivers. It's not ideal for us to live in or for the environment.
Is the white color ash?
Yes, yeah, that would be a very fine kind of everything really consumed, that white ash. And so just talking a little bit more about fire intensity. So down on the bottom, we've got our different ranks. So if I'm referring to a rank 5, rank 6 later on in the presentation, it's the bad ones right here. And then here we just have a little bit of spread information. So here in the middle, it says ladder fuel, and this is surface fuel. So in FireSmart, we really care about this layer of fuel that can help get a surface fire into the crown. And so this is another illustration of how fire spreads. So we can see spot fires coming out around the front, the head of the fire. And so that is specifically what we're concerned about with this program. We're losing 80% of our homes to ember transfer. It's not the flank of the fire, the head of it actually reaching people's homes that is our statistic risk here. It is embers flying through the air and sometimes starting fires kilometers ahead of the fire itself. So we talk about fuels, fine fuels, medium fuels, and heavy fuels. So fine fuels, something that you can light with a barbecue lighter. And that would be our blue bunch wheatgrass. And you know, if you're ever lit a campfire, anything that you use that small dryer lint, a piece of paper, those are fine fuels. Medium fuels would be the next part that we're building on our campfire. The bigger sticks that we're using to try to get the fire hot enough so that it can burn a whole log. And then heavy fuels is the log. So if in FireSmart, the heavy fuels are the buildings, we are trying to mitigate the fine fuels and the medium fuels, because that is how embers are going to turn into a fire that is big enough to actually consume parts of the building or property. Now, I'm just gonna skip this guy. This is a wonderful video, but I'm going a little bit too long here. So if you wanna check this out, it's on the Farm and Ranch program. And especially if you're living on an acreage or outside of town, a little bit more specific advice on how to deal with some of the FireSmart issues that you might face there. This one we gotta watch. So this is Fort McMurray. It's kind of long, so I can talk while it's going. Sorry, everyone. We're just gonna skip that. So basically, what you would have seen there is a video from Fort McMurray, and there's a line of traffic trying to evacuate. There is a very large, very intense fire happening off to the side. And then there's some space before the road that everybody's traveling on, kind of a green, grassy area. And then on the other side of that, you have people's homes and just a neighborhood, basically front yards on the other side of the street. So as people are driving, there's an unfortunate motorcyclist, and you can see that he's feeling the heat. And that part's important because the radiant heat from a rank 5 wildfire is very, very hot. And yeah, so people in that scenario might not do very well if they're, outside in their motorcycle jacket, and basically the traffic was holding him up, and he was being pretty polite on a motorcycle. And so nothing on the other side of the road started on fire until we see the embers coming down, and they're landing everywhere, all over the homes. Nothing is happening. And then we see a little evergreen tree about 5 meters from someone's deck. And in less than 30 seconds, as you continue down that street, that entire home is going to burn. You can see the front of it is totally engulfed. And yeah, you can see it in action happening. The ember, the bush, the deck, the house. And so Fort McMurray was disastrous. We did learn quite a bit, and one of our big takeaways from that fire was these decks that we have. So a lot of that deck style was just a little bit off the ground with a space with dead grass and leaves, probably some cedar lattice in a crisscross shape. It's nice kindling coming up the front of it. The entire construction is wood. It's detached. There are gaps between the deck and the house. There are, wicker chairs and a straw broom leaning up against the door. So, yeah, we learned a lot about decks and deck construction and maintenance from that. Right, exactly. Oh, the things that people put underneath their decks. So we've got jerry cans, we've got a straw bale for the dog, we've got the lawnmower, probably also full of gas, all of the building supplies. I could go on, yeah. It's a lot of stuff under decks. Yeah. So, FireSmart BC. This is directed by the BC FireSmart Committee, and it's also FireSmart Canada. Oops. Yeah, so FireSmart Canada is a standard recognized by all the provinces and territories, and it's based on the NFPA, and that's been evolved for over 40 years. And so this is backed by field research, laboratory research. They have been studying this in some pretty fascinating ways that you wouldn't imagine. Like, there are forests up in the Northwest Territories where they will like burn them for science with cabins in front of them, and they have been doing that for a long time. So there's a lot of good science, and all of these studies that I'm talking about in here today and that FireSmart refers to are available on the FireSmart BC website. So please check them out because they're pretty interesting. So the idea is that this is accessible to everybody. The programs are tried and tested, and they can help individuals to protect their own properties, but they also help to build community resilience in a way that fosters communication between neighbors, just kind of knowing if somebody needs a hand in the case of an evacuation. It is true that the more resilient communities tend to be the smaller ones because people know one another and talk to each other and can help each other in these situations. So locally, the regional district has a couple of things going on with the neighborhood recognition program. So this is a program that encourages folks to reach out to a FireSmart representative and then start meeting annually with the community to do fuel management or educational programs. So the RDEK has the bin incentive and the chipping incentive, and these are applied through grants. And so once a community is engaged, it's really easy for us to bring a bin or a chipping company in to help remove the identified things from the hazard ignition zones, which is a phrase I haven't used yet, but I'll talk about it in a moment here. And there's a really strong drive for education as well. So being at events like this, as well as the History Center's Children Program had an event about a month ago, showing up at our different community events, and you'll find those on the webpage from the RDEK listed here under upcoming events. So please check it out if you're trying to find more things to go to. So this is a picture from Kelowna. This is one of the reasons why we do this. So it's a highly effective tool. You can see that one of these is not like the other. And so why did that house stay standing and the rest of them burn? They go in and we do post-fire evaluations and studies. And there's actually a lot that can be learned after the fact with a fire investigation. So in Kelowna, from the Grouse Complex and the McDougall Complex, when folks went in and did this type of study, they found a 95% survival rate for folks that had fire-smarted their property from 10 meters, not even the whole 30 meters. It was just those 10 meters. And so we'll get that sometimes because the houses are actually that close together. It's really hard to do that because the zones are overlapping. But if you focus on anything after coming here today, the 10 meters closest to your property, and if you really work on that, you can be very resilient. So here we are, and it seems to be getting kind of hotter every year, and either we hear about more fires, or we see more fires, or there's more smoke in the air, and it does appear to be affecting people more. So where is that coming from? We're all living in the wildland-urban interface, and so that is the area where the wildland and people meet. And there's been a few events in the last few years that I can think about that have caused an increase in the number of people living in more rural areas, an increase in people recreating in these areas, more people in general, so more vehicle and engine use. You know, we have a lot of industry out there, and so with an increase in Canada's population slowly over time, our different industrial activity goes up as well. Railroads, hydro lines, there's more of them, more hydro lines being put in. There is also more recreation, more ATV use, kind of miscellaneous things like fireworks, like sky lanterns, or, you know, different types of tannerite and that kind of thing. As well as that, we do have open burning, which includes campfires, as well as category 2 and 3. And those are the bigger piles that you see out in the forest, often used in industry. And so all of these things are contributing to more human-caused wildfires out there. So these are some numbers. And first I've got 2008 to 14 up on the board. And so we can see a 10-year average in here. And we're looking at approximately 400,000 hectares burned. And a hectare is 100 meters by 100 meters. So, you know, 58% caused by lightning, this is all of BC. But I believe in the southeast, we're looking at about 60% lightning-caused fires. So that's kind of right on par with where we're sitting at. And then the cost, $316.9 million. And so on the next slide, I've got some more recent years. So 2015 to 2023. And the numbers have changed a little bit here. Yeah, so we've got a lot more total hectares burnt, and you can see that adding up from these sort of heavy-hitting fire seasons that we've had in BC. It's been costing us an awful lot of money, and you know, the causes every year, lightning to human cause, it fluctuates depending on the year, but we're looking at a similar ratio, but a lot more fires, a lot more smoke, a lot more big, intense fires. So yeah, there's a lot of reasons to go back to this. You know, it's getting warmer out there. The hydrology is changing. There's a lot of reasons why. But the fact is that we live in a fire-prone environment. It is supposed to burn here every 7 years on average in every part of the Rocky Mountain Trench. And so it has to eventually burn.
And that was just BC?
That was just BC. That was just BC. So FireSmart has the plant program, home partners, neighborhood recognition, education, library program, and other partnerships depending on the region. The farm and ranch is really interesting, and it's kind of a smaller branch of it, but I think a lot of people in this area could benefit from that. This year in particular, a lot of insurance companies have been calling the FireSmart program. They want to know if an assessment has been done, but they're not really sure what that means. So they're coming. They're probably going to wind up having some sort of a program themselves where they can assess whether a house is likely to burn or not. And then, of course, the First Nations have a pretty good driving force in the burn programs, especially in our area, and just across the province being involved in FireSmart projects for decades already. So I want to draw your attention to the landscaping and plant program. This is the resource that I brought for that. But if you go online, you can type in pretty well any species of plant that you're thinking of putting in your yard. and it will give you information about the hardiness zone. It'll tell you to put it in sun or shade, moisture requirements, pollinators, deer resistance, and then on the site online, it will actually give you a meters measurement to say this plant would be safe 5 meters from your defensible structures. This plant would be better 20 meters from your defensible structures. This plant can go in the 1.5 meters closest to your house. So yeah, really cool resource to check out, especially if you're into gardening. So local FireSmart representatives are the folks that are trained to work in your area with your people. And if you're trying to find out anything about the program, I would advise that you reach out to an LFR. Yeah, this is the link down here, but I'll also have just a link to the BC FireSmart page up at the end. And so I can help connect you. If you're in the RDEK, I can connect you to programs that are happening in your community. We can start them up if you've got the interest. But yeah, please reach out for any of our programs. This is the home ignition zone. So I'm going to pretend I'm doing an assessment with all of you, and I'm going to talk about what I would say as I walk around the building. We always start at the roof, and then we work our way down and then out. And yeah, I just want to share this because it's something that everybody can do in their own home and share with their neighbors and have a very resilient property there afterwards. So we're going to start in the immediate zone with the roof. So first we're going to look at the roof condition. Does it have any holes? Are there gaps? Are there cracks? What is the material of the roof made of? So asphalt and metal are highly fire resistant, and those will protect a great deal of your property just in the roof material itself. So from there, we're going to check vents, openings, and the very important number to remember when we're working on the house itself is 3 millimeters. So 3 millimeters is the size of an opening that you want to allow if there is the possibility of an ember going through the wall and into the insulation on the other side. Same thing with the roof. If it can somehow penetrate through, so let's say if there's a ridge cap vent up here and it doesn't have any type of screening, then embers landing on the roof might get caught by a breeze and pushed up and into the attic. Or if this vent has very big openings, then embers can go directly into the building. Now, if there's just kind of a little bit of, say, damage up here, maybe a flicker was tapping away on the eaves, and it's not actually going right into the building, then we care about 3 centimeters. So this is some place where embers can accumulate, but maybe not get right into the building. And so any sort of gap or crack or place where it's falling apart should be 3 centimeters or smaller in order to be safe on the roof. And this stands for the siding as well. 3 centimeters anywhere on the siding that has gaps or cracks or holes. We really want to make sure that we're repairing those spots. So with the eaves troughs themselves, if there, say, is a big tree dropping leaves on your roof or needles on your roof, you might find that the eaves troughs are full of fine fuels. So getting up there and cleaning the roof and cleaning out the eaves troughs is one of the most important and least glamorous parts about this whole thing. Very, very important to do. Windows, doors, we, for the most part, have very fire-resistant materials in our modern builds. You might find some single-pane glass on older homes, and this has less fire resilience to it. So that extra layer will provide the resilience against radiant heat. And we want to see double pane or tempered glass. Weather stripping, same idea as the vents and other openings. If you can get inside the house with an ember, say under the door from being pushed in the wind or settling on top of a window frame, then that's a point of entry to light the property on fire. In the soffits, we also want to look very carefully all around and underneath the soffits for the same issues. Openings that go into the building, vents with openings 3 millimeters or larger, and then cracks and places where it needs to be repaired, 3 centimeters and larger. As well with the immediate zone, this is the area that's going to include the 1.5 meters closest to the building. So this is something that really affects whether a building is going to be resilient or not. The Lytton fire was the one where, if you look at the study, the 1.5 meters closest to people's houses had a lot of dry, dead grass. It was a very droughty year. There were a lot of materials, building supplies, things piled, which is most of us in this area next to the buildings. And they also had a lot of salmon drying racks, which are a medium fuel with oil on them, which is kind of similar to what we're talking about with resin. So those were all in the immediate zone piled up against the buildings. And unfortunately, in the case of this fire, homes were still lighting 2 hours after the grass fire swept through because of the amount of stuff in the 1.5 meters closest to the homes. That's a really good example. Yeah, wood chips in this area is, yeah, definitely. It's just little pieces of kindling, right? And I mentioned the decks earlier. There's more information about decks and porches over on the table. I am aware I'm going a little bit over time, so I'll try to go a little bit faster with these parts, but please pay close attention to the immediate zone. This is the most critical part. If you really do nothing else, address this area of your home, and it will make a massive difference. So the intermediate zone, now we're in the 1.5 meters to 10 meters, and we're starting to get a little bit more relaxed with our measurements. So you can see that there are trees in this example, there are shrubs, and there's green grass, but there doesn't have to be. So in this area, we care that the grass is 10 meters or shorter. Green is obviously better. Any sort of vegetation, we would recommend that it be non-combustible. So then that's coming back to our landscaping guide, wherever you're not aware of what those species might be. And the kind of quick way to find out is if you crush the leaves, do they smell really strong? Like a pine needle, you would crush it and it would smell very fragrant. And if it cracks, it's probably gonna burn and it produces resin.
You said grass 10 meters long. What do you mean?
Centimeters, yeah. So we recommend mowing the grass to 10 centimeters or shorter in this area. Yeah. And then it's very critical to keep it green in the 1.5 meters. As we get further away, we're kind of a little bit more relaxed, but green is better, obviously. If you have grass in the 1.5 meters, 10 centimeters and green next to your house. So 10 to 30 meters. In this example, you'll see some conifer trees, and they are spaced. They are pruned to 2 meters where the branches hang down to, not where they meet on the stem. And if they were next to one another, you would see 3-meter crown spacing. So 3 is a really good number to remember. We've got 3 millimeters on the building, 3 centimeters for the exterior part of the building, and then 3 meters once we move out into the yard for keeping our flammable things spaced. And I would recommend doing the same with any type of flammable materials. So say you've got your wood piles, spacing them from your flammable trees is a good idea. In the summertime, we really want to make sure that those wood piles are 10 meters away from the house. Keeping them stacked up against the house is really only going to help the mice find their way in. We're not burning it anyways, it's too hot outside. It's a really good practice to move those wood piles in the spring. So this is a checklist that they used in Kelowna, and they handed it out to folks as a last minute thing. So most of this program is, you work on it over time. You work this into your regular home maintenance, and then, there are a few things that if you need to do it in a pinch, then you can do that. So I personally was evacuated, I think 3 times from the same fire when I was working on it up north. And so I went home with the 15 minutes that I had, and I took my barbecue propane and I threw it, and I kicked a big wooden spool that I had and I rolled it 10 meters away, and I just, any little things, doormat, broom, 10 meters away from the house. And then when we're overlapping again, this is where it really comes in handy to speak to your neighbors, to maybe plan with your neighbors. If somebody is building a fence, maybe we need to think about having a metal gate in there somewhere so that we can break up that wooden continuity and stop it from reaching everybody's home. Just different things that you can think about. If your neighbor is a senior and they need help moving their wood pile, but they would love to bake you cookies while you're working. These are the things that the neighborhood recognition program tries to foster. Ooh. Okay, nope, I'm skipping this one. We don't have time for this. So that video was one of our experiments that we look at. And so basically they built a great big fan, and they have it in a warehouse, and they have small constructions of the different types of materials for siding and windows and roof. And then they blow the embers. And so one of the things that I didn't mention about siding was the type of material that we're using for that really matters. So the one, they have vinyl, another they have cedar shake, and then they have metal siding on the third. And they drop all kinds of burning bark mulch into this big fan and just blow embers at the building. And so what you see is the cedar shingle that is very combustible. It burns immediately. We have sort of mixed results with the vinyl. So any sort of petroleum product is going to melt. It is combustible. So it does burn, it does create flammable fumes, but it's not as vigorous as the cedar shake would be. And then metal, it was a standalone. It did not need a sprinkler on the roof, it just survived. It was absolutely fine. So, if you're looking for resources for yourself, I would recommend checking out the FireSmart BC website, and I've also brought some guides that you can have a look at. The FireSmart Begins at Home is a really good beginner tool. The assessments that I've mentioned are available, and that's through the RDEK. So you can give me a shout. I've got my card on the table here, and I have my contact information on the very last slide. Please check out the FireSmart BC website. There is really a ton of good information in there. If you work with children, there's an entire education curriculum available with worksheets. It's excellent. There's a lot. And then if you're not in the RDEK, you can still get involved. You can speak to your own neighbors. You can bring this information forward yourself. You can listen to the podcast, sign up for the newsletter, share Ember, the fire fox, with your kids. Ember is our mascot, the fire fox who thinks smart. So yeah, give us a follow on social media, and if you go to any one of these, it will take you to a platform that can lead you further. These are the links that I wanted to make everybody aware of today. And then I also have the Voyant Alert up on here. Now that's an app that the RDEK uses to push evacuation alerts and orders. So it sort of works like an Amber Alert on your phone. It just kind of sits quiet in the background. And then if there is an actual alert or order in the specific place that you live, then it will go off, and it'll go off loud. So yeah, please, if you live anywhere in the regional district of East Kootenay, Cranbrook, etc., have the Voyant Alert on your phone to get the fastest notifications about that. And yeah, I'm going to post my contact information on the last slide here, but I was just wondering if there are any questions before I do that.
Yeah, before I asked you about the propane, if you have like a barbecue outside, propane or gas for a lawnmower, where is the best place to put those things? Is it outside our house because it's convenient?
Perfect, thank you. So the propane, gas tanks, barbecue, if there's a fire coming, and I know it's not reasonable to keep it there permanently, most people have their barbecues pretty close to the house, you want that propane 10 meters away at least. So if you're installing a new propane tank, if you get your heat from propane, which is a lot of people out here, then also consider that. You want to put your propane tank far away from any buildings that you're trying to protect, and also far away from any other heavy fuel, because they can be very safe when there isn't a very intense fire next to them.
So where do you store your gasoline?
At least 10 meters.
Okay.
At least 10 meters. Yeah. And so if you have a gas shed, then that shed should either be 10 meters away from any building that you're trying to protect, or it should be treated to the same standards. So the roof, the siding, all of the aspects of that building have been fire smarted to the same standard as the building you're trying to protect. And you can put other combustible things in there too, on that note. Building supplies, wood piles. If you don't have an option to move it 10 meters or more away, then you can enclose it, and that will have the same effect.
They showed on American, it was like PBS News or something. There's a program in Spokane area where they bring a blower that blows styrofoam popcorn things
Yeah,
on people's houses to show where embers would fall.
that's a really good idea. So she said that she saw an experiment where a lot of styrofoam was little popcorns, yeah. I sometimes use an example of confetti. Like if you just threw a whole bunch of confetti in the air, where would it land? Or in the springtime when the snow is melting, you can see little places around the house where it gathers and takes a while to melt. So maybe check those places. What's that? V-shaped houses, yes, peaks where things can gather. Yeah, exactly.
They actually had one of those machines at the wildfire conference this spring in Penticton, and they did the popcorn demonstration.
That's so cool. Ah, we should do that here.
Maybe we can get it here.
We should do that too. Yeah, any other questions? That was a really good one. Thank you.
What about firewood? So we have a woodshed.
Yep.
And with firewood piles all in there and
Yep.
an open building, then what do you do?
What about a woodshed? Okay, so is the woodshed 10 meters or more from your,
It's in a building,
it's in a,
probably not 10 meters from our house,
yeah?
house maybe.
Mm-hmm. Is it, what kind of a building is it? Could you describe the building to me?
It's a two-story barn with one corner of it firewood storage.
Mm-hmm. And does the barn, is it open? Or are there doors that close on it?
The woodshed is wide open.
It's wide open? Yeah, so that's honestly very common to see, especially on the rural properties where you have bigger buildings, and often there's hay and stuff in there too. So it's a little bit trickier to mitigate. I would, if you can't renovate the entire building, then I would try to enclose the firewood itself.
Door that front, maybe,
Yeah, and keeping all of these things in mind that embers need fine fuels to ignite, right? And then fine fuels need to find medium fuels in order to light the heavy ones. So if there's an area, say, where you have open and like a floor of gravel or dirt that's non-combustible, then take advantage of that. Create a fire break, and then make sure that area stays clean, and then enclose your firewood elsewhere. Or like very last case kind of scenario, and you'll find tips like this in the Farm and Ranch video as well, is to hang tarps. If the fire is on the landscape and you're getting an alert, then even like plastic wrapped around the wood pile will help, because we're trying to keep those embers out. Yeah, just a little tiny ember flying through the sky. So keep that in mind, and then just think about if it landed in this corner, maybe we should move the brooms over here, or maybe we should hang them on the wall or something. Yeah, trying to break it up and keep it as tidy as you can. And that 1.5 meters, so if you can make that 1.5 meters around the building non-combustible, fantastic. Gravel is a pretty quick way to do that on an outbuilding. Keeping the grass mowed and green in that 1.5 meters specifically around the building. Do everything that you can around it, right? So keep using the guidelines, keep applying it. If you're on a very steep slope, you can increase that 1.5 meters to 3 meters, and then that will stop the fire from having the space it needs to jump the gap. Yeah, another super good question. Very relevant out here, I think. Yeah. Any more questions? I really appreciate everybody taking this time. I am aware that I've gone over, and I appreciate everybody listening to me for all this time. More questions? Yeah. Okay. Oops. This is me. There we go. So if you have any more questions, please reach out to me. I also have my card on the table. It has my phone number on it, and you can call or text that number. Yeah, I really appreciate everybody coming tonight. LFR. Yes, thank you.